Welcome back to Chickens! This video and the next video are videos that I've been looking forward to filming for a long time, like through most of the year. So first up today, their video today is the recent reads of Rereads, because out of the 5 books we will be covering today, 3 of them are rereads, and then one is kind of a reread, and then we got one book that I haven't read before. So let's get into it. So the first book I reread was A Cup of Cold Water by Christine Farenhorst. So I first read this book in grade 8, and it's one of those books where, this is gonna sound really specific, but it happened to me twice. So it's one of those situations where like you get a book and you're not really interested in reading it, but then you pick it up because you have to read something and you're like, this will do. But then after you read it, you're like, I'm glad I read this instead of just letting it gather dust on my shelves. So it's not like an all-time favorite book, but a solid read. So yeah, that's the case of this book. So this is a biography. It's part of the Chosen Daughters series, which is a multi-authored series of biographies of Christian women in history. So yeah, so this and I nearly forgot to say this. So I looked at the series on Goodreads and I thought the series was like longer, but it turns out I had all the books in the series at one point. I unhauled the only other one I've read because I didn't really like it that much. So yeah, so this book is a biography of a woman named Edith Cavell. She kind of grew up with like a, she grew up Christian and stuff, and then she later became a nurse and eventually had a part in being a nurse during World War One. And I keep wanting to say World War Two, but that's not correct. So yeah, because this is a biography, this is kind of hard to review because like this stuff actually happened, so it might not be able to, it might not always work that well. It was interesting because I was 13 when I first read this book, and it's interesting rereading it as an adult because there's definitely been parts in this book where I was like, oh yeah, that would have went over my head when I was 13, or oh, I wouldn't have known what that word meant. So yeah, I will say the one critique, I guess, was that there was parts to where like she becomes a nurse and then starts this like nursing school. Like the time between starting the nursing school to when World War One starts, it felt kind of rushed. But again, since this is a biography, maybe there's not enough information about the time in between there, or maybe it really wasn't. Like, I don't know. So, and another thing that was interesting reading it the second time through is that, so later on in the book there's this guy that comes into the clinic and then he's being flirty with the young nurses. And I don't think I caught this the first time I read it, but reading it the second time through, that guy's name is Gaston. Yeah, I don't think I caught that because I think I would have remembered, seeing as we were doing Beauty and the Beast at the time. So yeah. So yeah, solid book again. So yeah. The next book I reread was Pretense by Lori Wick. So I first, okay, this has gotten me a little tough to explain. So I first started reading this book the first time in 2022. So I started reading it, and I think I got to either chapter 10 or chapter 11 where it was like, there's no way I'm gonna finish this book this summer. So I returned it to the church library because that's where I got it from. But I was thinking I would pick it back up again. So the next year in 2023, I picked it up again, started from where I left off, and I think I finished the whole book in a little less than a month. I don't know. It wasn't as long as I thought, because like this book is like 700 pages. Um, although this time when I read it in a little over a week. And I think part of the reason why I did is because I made myself a playlist for this book. Yeah, I made a playlist because also when I first finished Pretense during that summer where I didn't really like anything I read, so and that is the only book from that summer that I have since revisited, and I think the playlist probably helped me read it in a short amount of time, and I will make the playlist public and link it in the description. Um so yeah. So yeah, it's hard to do. I'm not sure how to do the synopsis for this one because uh, this had me kind of like, I don't know who is in charge of coming up with synopsis on the back of the books, because for Pretense and also the other only Lori Wick book I've read, White Chocolate Moments, like the back cover is like not, it's not inaccurate, but like that's not how I sum it up. But thankfully, I think on Goodreads there's also an alternate synopsis, so but I'll try to sum it up. So this book is about the Bishop family. So you have the parents, Meryl and Paul, and then you have their two daughters, Mackenzie and Delancey. So the first part of the book focuses more on the parents, and so their life's good for them, but they feel like something's missing, and soon they discover that what they're missing is Christ. Um, so they move on, but then their daughters are not so sure about that. But then things happen, and the two daughters go out on their own, and then will they also find the hope that their parents had? Yeah, I guess I did better than I thought. So yeah, so reading it the second time through, I did for the most part, like it more than the first time read it through. I will say I have a bit of a correction because I also, of course, talked about this when I talked about the books I read in summer 2023. There's a little bit of a correction with the Brett Cooper thing, not to be confused with the conservative commentator. There's a character in this book named Brett Cooper. Although, another thing with like character names, there's also a character in this book named Carol Wagner, and I thought I had heard of someone named Carol Wagner, but it turns out the person I was thinking of, that's not their name, although I'm sure there is someone named Carol Wagner. But anyway, so Brett Cooper in this book, he's like a boy that like kind of shows interest in Mackenzie, um, and then I thought the first time I read through that, like, they showed established interest, but then Mackenzie later says, "Oh, he's a jerk," but we never really find out what happens. Turns out we do actually find out what happens, and I don't remember coming across the part of Mackenzie calling him a jerk the second time through, so I don't know why that is. And then, so the thing that I don't like about um the synopsis on the back cover of Pretense. Now, I realize that reading it more closely, it doesn't actually say this, but when I read that synopsis before I had read the book, I got the impression from it that Mackenzie and Delancey like have a strained relationship where they don't really get along. Whereas if you've read the book, you know that that is not the case. I mean, sure, there were some times when they were kids that they weren't always the nicest to each other, and I guess there was a bit of distance, but overall, they had a pretty sweet, good relationship, which is very precious to see, especially since I know not all sisters have a good relationship with each other. So yeah, so I thought, so I was really liking it the first time I thought, oh, this will be at least 4 stars. But then we get to the last 30 to 25% of it. And I didn't really like that last 30 to 25% the first time I read it, and I didn't really like it the second time I read it. Just because, and I'll try to be vague to not give spoilers, but to me, by like the 70% mark, we've already reached the goal of the book for these for Mackenzie and Delancey. And so like the last 30 to 25% feels almost like an extended epilogue. Like obviously it's not, because there's more. I guess there seems to be something's unresolved, but I don't know. I just didn't. I don't really like it. Like it's like why are we still here? I don't care about what's happening now. So yeah. So I think I ended up giving it either 3.5, 3.75, but it would have been 4 stars, if not more than that, if I had liked the last 30 to 25% more. So yeah. All right. Next, I read the only book in this video that is not a reread, and that is In Some Other Life by Jessica Brody. So, the reason why this book is on my radar, this is going to be a lot of context. So, like, for a while, like, I kind of want to be a writer and, like, write books and stories and stuff, but I feel like I can't be because I like a story. I'll get a story idea and I'll like develop it and it'll like stay in my head for a while. But then I'll try to write it and then I'll get disturbed by how bad my writing is. Then I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I guess they can't get me down. But then I get distracted by another story idea. So it's like, oh. So, but because I've like wanted to be a writer, I've like watched a lot of like writing advice videos on YouTube. And I guess one thing that I've been doing is like picking up books um, by people who do writing advice on YouTube to, I guess, see if their writing advice is worth taking. Which is why I read 100 Days of Sunlight by Abby Emmons. That's why I read What Lies Above by Caitlin Lambert, although I don't know. I haven't watched a ton of content by Caitlin Lambert. That's why I read this book. Um, Although I believe with Jessica Brody, her most popular book is a writing advice book, but of course I wanted to read one of her fiction books, and this one just sounded the most interesting to me. So this book is about a girl named Kennedy, and for a while, since she was young, she's wanted to go to this special private school called Windsor Academy because it just looks so beautiful and stuff. But what people in her life don't know is that when she was in grade 9, when she was going into grade 9, I guess this kind of takes place in America, so I guess her freshman year, she was actually put off the wait list and had a spot. They had a spot available for her, but because because at around the same time, a guy she really liked had asked her out, and she knew a relationship where they went to two different schools wouldn't work in high school, she just never responded to that offer, and so no one knew that she got accepted into the school. So then fast forward to grade 12, her senior year, and she discovers that her boyfriend has been cheating on her with her best friend. And then she's then she's kind of like, I made the wrong decision. I should have been accepted into that. I should have chosen to go to this school. But then something happens and she gets transported to another life where she did choose to go to that school. And she realizes that things aren't all great in that life either. So, yeah. So, in this book, it was interesting. I kind of went back and forth a bit, like on whether I liked it or stuff. Like, when I first started reading, I was like, oh, this writing is different, but I don't know if I like it or if I don't like it. But then it was like, I don't like this writing, and I don't think I like Kennedy. Um, and then but then I guess I went back to kind of liking it, and then I went back and forth on the romance. But then by the last, I think like 20%, I was like flying through the book, and I think this might have a spot on one of I have a spot on my best books for 2025. That's something. So yeah, and I guess one thing that I also didn't know what to make of this, and I'm not sure if this was intentional or enough, but I feel like with kind of like Kennedy adjusting to the fact of her being in another life, I feel like I was figuring things out faster than she was. Though I don't know if that was intentional or not. Now this next part of this review, things, I don't think one is a spoiler, but I think in another part of it most definitely will be spoiler. So I'll allow people to skip and put a timestamp, but know that when you skip that timestamp, I will still be talking about this book. So here's the timestamp. Skip it. Okay, so um so obviously, as we heard in the synopsis, her boyfriend cheats on her with her best friend. But then when she's in her other life, she kind of, I guess, kind of stalks. But she goes like, finds um them, and they are together in this other life. And then she kind of comes to a realization of like, oh, they were meant for each other, and I was in the way. And with that message, with that kind of thing, I just wish that it had been greater emphasized that that doesn't make cheating okay, like even if they are meant for each other. So, yeah. And then another thing this will definitely be a spoiler because it's about stuff at the end of the book. So, but I guess you can kind of see it coming if you so she's gone to this like a parallel universe where she's like her other life where she chose, but then she thinks she can't get back to original life. So, but then she eventually does go back to original life. But what I'm confused about is like she went to another life, so would that mean that other her went to her original life? But like she's, we have read the book. I know this is a spoiler section, but I don't want to spoil it too much. But like she's made quite a bit of a mess in other her's life. But then when she gets back to her original life, everything seems like it hasn't changed at all. So I'm just confused about how that works. So yeah. Alright. So I guess one critique I would have about this book is that sometimes when things were happening, we have Kennedy's thoughts about what is happening on the page. And I guess sometimes that having those thoughts there, and sometimes it went on for a while, it's like slowed down the pacing, and I felt like I was kind of skimming some parts. And then for content things about this book, um, there is one usage of one bad word, but I can't remember exactly what word it was. I think it was the A word, but I'm not sure on that. But other than that, this is a clean read. There's no spice or anything. So yeah. Next book is the one I was talking about for kind of a reread, although while I was rereading, I remembered more stuff happening, so I think I might have actually read most of this book before, and that is Summer According to Humphrey by Betty G. Birney. Like, look at this. Yeah, so because it's called Summer According to Humphrey, the reason why I made myself finish Pretense in a while, and you wasn't trying on as hard to finish In Some Other Life in a while, is because I wanted to be able to read this book in the summer. It's called Summer According to Humphrey. So yeah. Um, and this is actually the 6th book in a series, and I have not read the other books in the series, but I do plan on reading it. So this book is, of course, about Humphrey, and he is a classroom pet, but then summer is approaching, and he's discovered that school ends. And so he's like, oh, what do I do now? Am I going to be out of a job or something? But then, luckily, some of his people at the school take him to this summer camp, and um he sees a lot of his friends, some of his class, the kids in his class at the summer camp and stuff, and then there's this big competition and stuff, and he's like, a bunch of fun things happen. This was unsqueakably cute, as Humphrey would say. I mean, Humphrey's just, it's just so cute, and he's with like the way he talks and like kind of things. But then he also has, at the end of each chapter, he has little like note to self things about the different things. Yeah, I don't have that much to say on this book. Um, and I gave this 3.5 stars. I think I enjoyed it enough for it to be 4 stars, but I don't think it deserves 4 stars. So I think 3.5 stars is fair enough. So the last book for this video is Holes by Sachar. And that is apparently how his last name is pronounced according to Goodreads. So, speaking of Goodreads, I wasn't planning to do a whole thing on Sachar, but looking through his Goodreads, it's like, wow, I didn't know he wrote that book. So he started his career by publishing his first book in the Wayside School series. I remember kind of those books. And then he also wrote another book a teacher had read to me before this book. That was There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom. That was actually a pretty good book. So now Holes. Now I was hesitant to call this a reread at first because the first time I read this book, it was my 5th grade teacher reading it aloud to us. So I wasn't sure. But I guess if people count audiobooks as having read a book, then I guess this counts as a reread. So, I mean, I suppose I could just read the back. So this, I'm not sure, I might struggle to do a synopsis. So, this book is about a boy named Stanley, and he gets arrested for stealing a pair of sneakers. And the judge gives him an option to either go to jail or go to Camp Green Lake. So he chooses to go to Camp Green Lake, not knowing, but it turns out Camp Green Lake is not really a lake, it's a big desert place, and these boys who've been arrested have to dig these holes every day. But, Okay, I looked at the back synopsis to see what I could say without giving spoilers. But, so yeah, they're digging the holes, but then Stanley realizes there's more to digging holes than just building character. And he also, yeah, I don't know what else I can say. So this is kind of a classic case of don't judge a book by its cover, because I don't know if you can see very well in this bright light, but this is kind of a weird cover. Like, why does he look like that? And you can't really tell, but like the art style of this sand and stuff, and the art style of this is different. It's like, it's so weird. And I've realized in recent years that like covers have more of an influence on how much I want to read a book than I'd like to admit. Okay, but this is a pretty good book. And one thing I love about this book, like I liked it when our teacher had first read to it when I was in grade 5, so much that I somehow got a copy of this one. But I guess I didn't really have much of an understanding of good literature. But one thing I like about this book that I can appreciate as an adult is that things that are mentioned and like talked about, like they have a purpose in the story and everything kind of fits together like a puzzle. I love stuff like that. And so yeah, I don't have much more to say. I heard there's apparently like a second book and it follows one of the other boys at the camp, so I'll probably have to check out that one, but I doubt it'll be as good as this one. Which actually, in terms of reading this one, I thought I kind of wondered if it would be like 4.5, maybe even 5 stars. I ended up giving this a 4-star, which is still pretty good. So yeah, but that's all. So that is all for today's video. I hope you all enjoy it, and stay tuned for my next video because I'm also looking forward to filming that one. So goodbye.